400 years ago, in late August, a ship landed on what is now United States territory. And on that ship, having taken a dangerous and terrifying and many times deadly journey, were people who had been kidnapped from Africa and brought to this place to serve as slaves for the rest of their lives. And this was just the beginning. Now, it would be nice and it would be easy for us to ignore this and to sweep it under the rug and pretend that this is not a part of our history. To go on this day without commemorating the beginning of this history of our nation. But those who ignore the past, perhaps even more than those who don't know it, are doomed to repeat it and live it out for eternity. We can't continue to sweep under the rug what has happened in this nation and its effects still today, 400 years after those first Africans were kidnapped and brought here to be slaves. It would be nice if we could say, well, slavery has been abolished and racism has been taken care of, and now we're in this new place, this new time. But saying that is just a lie. I don't know about you, but I was only recently made aware that the 13th Amendment to our Constitution doesn't in fact abolish slavery. Its text reads that slavery and indentured servitude are abolished, will not be allowed in this place, except in the case of someone committing a crime, and then we are free to force them into slavery or servitude for as long as we would like. Slavery was never completely abolished from this place, and racism is certainly alive and well. Some might say that it's worse than ever, but I think it's more like when you go to sweep up a room in your house, and you take the broom and you get under the furniture, and you get into the cracks, and you start sweeping all of the stuff together, and you are disgusted by what you found in those places. This is the period in which we are in our history as the United States. All those things that we have swept under the rug and the furniture and into the corner for 400 years are being brought right into one big pile, and we are disgusted by what we see in our world, in our nation, in our communities, and in ourselves. We in the ELCA are a part of this problem. You see, the ELCA is the whitest denomination in the United States. 96% of ELCA members are white. This doesn't reflect our nation. It certainly doesn't reflect a community in Texas. But this is our reality. We, as the ELCA, have raised up not one, but two white supremacist murderers. Two different young men who committed murders on the basis of the color of someone else's skin. We are the descendants of people who owned slaves, people who supported slavery using the Bible. The same Bible that says all people are created in God's image. We are a part of the problem even today, for we continue to live and support systems that perpetuate racism and inequality. We are the ones that if we were in the synagogue with Jesus, he would have turned to us and said, "You hypocrites." We, like the synagogue leaders, have asked our black siblings to just wait until a more convenient time. Right now is not the right time to complain of being bent over from the oppression of centuries in this nation. We have asked our siblings to come back at a better time, a more convenient time for us. When we are ready to hear them, we have asked them to ask more politely, to be treated equally. We have been the ones that Jesus Jesus would say, "You hypocrites." See, Jesus says to those gathered, those grumbling about this woman being healed on the Sabbath, "Don't you know how to treat your animals better than this? Don't each of you untie your animal and take them to water and let them drink on the Sabbath? Don't you do work that is good work, that is life-giving, life-saving work on the Sabbath? And if you know how to do this well for your animals, how could you not know how to do this well for this, a daughter of Abraham, who has been bent over from the weight of this for 18 years? Jesus uses some very specific language when he talks to the woman and then when he talks to those gathered around him. He says to the woman, "You are set free." And then when he is explaining to everyone else why it is good and right and exactly what the Sabbath calls for this woman to be healed, he doesn't say healed, he says set free on the Sabbath. Jesus knows that the Sabbath is about freedom from captivity and oppression. In his first sermon in Luke, Jesus says, "I have come to proclaim good news to the poor, release for the captives, and setting the oppressed free." And he spends the whole rest of the Gospel of Luke doing exactly those things. And it's happening here in this text today. You are set free from your ailment, he says. And the people who are gathered there, they're not ignorant about the laws of the Sabbath. They know that the Sabbath is all about freedom. They just wish it were more convenient for them. The Sabbath law in Deuteronomy, when Moses reiterates the 10 Commandments to the Israelite people, is completely grounded in freedom from captivity. Moses says to the people, you were a slave in Egypt, and God rescued you with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm, and therefore keep the Sabbath day. The people to whom Moses speaks, almost to a person, were not slaves in Egypt. When Moses reiterates the 10 Commandments to them, it is the next generation of people to whom he speaks. Those who were slaves in Egypt have died off. So not one person who hears what he says, "You were a slave," was truly a slave in Egypt. And yet this is the language he uses, because this is the story of Israel. This is the story of their relationship with God. God is the one who set you free from slavery in Egypt. Therefore, observe the Sabbath. And this is to what Jesus refers when he sets this woman free on the Sabbath day. Because the Sabbath is all about being made free. And it's about setting other people free too. So the Sabbath is not truly Sabbath if we rest, if we are free, but it is at the expense of someone else's ability to rest or be free. And too often we have made sure that we rest not just on one day of the week, but all days of the week, while others get no rest at all. For too often we have proclaimed our freedom without making sure that others too are set free from captivity. And for this, Jesus looks at us and says, "You hypocrites." We may feel uncomfortable being called hypocrites. We may wish that it weren't true. We may wish that this text didn't exist at all. But when Jesus calls people hypocrites, there are two things happening. First, there is a judgment we can feel just from the word itself, "You hypocrites." We know that we have turned against God's ways, that we have failed to love our neighbor and to love God. We have failed to set the captives free. We know that we have been complicit in systems that keep people enslaved even to this day. And we feel the weight of that judgment. But the second thing that happens when Jesus calls people hypocrites is a message of hope and promise and truth. For Jesus has said in other places, it's not those who are healthy who need a doctor. It's those who are sick. And so it is not those who are always doing the right thing as if that person exists, who need Jesus' forgiveness and grace and mercy. It is we who are hypocrites, who need to receive that love. And so in that very word is a promise that we too have been captive, and we too have been set free. For we say in our confession, we are captive to sin, and we cannot, will not free ourselves. But God, who is rich in mercy, loves us even when we are captive to sin and sets us free. And that is the promise of Sabbath. That is the promise of Christ, that we are set free, that we are brought, though we don't deserve it and have never earned it, are brought to new life, and that we are called to help set other captives free, to proclaim release to the oppressed, to bring good news to the poor. We have been set free so that we can proclaim and bring that freedom to others. 400 years ago, those first slaves stepped off that first ship into what is now the United States. And that fact and that history have remained with us ever since. They're still a part of the fabric of this nation. But we are here today. We are those who are beginning to determine what the next 400 years of U.S. history will look like. We are the ones who have heard, you are free. And we are called to be those who proclaim that to others. So may we be those who hear the promise of Sabbath, that the oppressed have release, that the captives are set free. And may we be those who join in doing so. For that is the call we have received as we have been set free and sent out. May it be so. Amen.